Corey James Christensen was born on January 30th, 1981, and lived in Townsville, Queensland, Australia. In 2005, he began a relationship with a woman named Jay. They had 3 sons together and married in 2015. Corey worked for Sun Metals, an industrial company located just outside Townsville. On Sunday, September 30th, 2018, Corey and his wife Jay visited Alva Beach, a quiet coastal community about 65 miles east of their home. People often go there for fishing and boating. That afternoon, Corey met up with an old friend, Louis Benoit, whom he had known since 1994. The 2 men drove around the area on a Polaris ATV. Now, this brings us to another key figure in the story. Thomas Ian Davy, born on December 20th, 1990. Lived in Cairns and worked as a structural engineer in the aviation industry. In July 2018, he began dating a woman named Candace Locke. On September 30th, 2018, Thomas and Candace drove to Alva Beach to fish and drink. Around 6 p.m., Corey and Louis approached them. Neither Thomas nor Candace had ever met either man. They were strangers. The 4 spoke for about 15 minutes, and Corey invited them to a National Rugby League Grand Final party being held on a vacant lot near his father's house. Thomas and Candace accepted the invitation and arrived as the game was starting. They continued drinking and became intoxicated. About halfway through the game, Thomas became upset with Candace's behavior and wanted to leave, but she refused. Louis told Thomas that Candace could stay at 9:39 p.m. Thomas left alone in his Toyota Land Cruiser. Around 10 p.m., he returned and tried again to convince Candace to leave. She still refused. Thomas drove away, but parked a short distance from the party. Between 10:30 and 11:30 p.m., Corey, Louis, and Candace got into the Polaris after Candace asked Louis to take her for a ride. During the ride, Candace fell from the vehicle and dislocated her shoulder. She would later give at least 5 different accounts of what happened, none of which could be verified. In one version, she claimed Louis pushed her. Louis said Candace fell, while playfully standing up with her arms out, imitating the Titanic pose. After the fall, Candace hid in the dark, and Louis was unable to find her. Louis returned to the party alone, told Corey what happened, and both men left on the Polaris to search for her. When they eventually found Candace, she got back into the ATV but claimed the men made jokes about her shoulder. Feeling unsafe, she demanded to get out. She walked to the first house she saw on Topton Street, the home of 19-year-old Dean Weber, who was asleep until she knocked on his door. She told him she had fallen off a buggy, was injured, and the men refused to call an ambulance. Dean let her in at 12:23 a.m., October 1st. 3 minutes later, at 12:26 a.m., Dean called 0000 to report that an injured woman needed help. Minutes later, Corey and Louis arrived at Dean's house, yelling, banging on the door, and calling for Candace. Dean turned off his lights, locked the doors, and told them to leave. Still on the phone with emergency services, he said he did not feel safe. Corey and Louis left, found Thomas, and all 3 returned to the house. It is unclear what Corey and Louis told Thomas. Although Candace had simply sought help, Thomas may have believed she was in danger and needed to be rescued. At 12:39 a.m., Dean texted a friend. ***, I'm about to die. Holy ***. I don't know what to do. At 12:42 a.m., a constable called Dean and told him police would arrive within 30 minutes. The response was slow more, we'll get there when we get there, then we're on our way. At 12:51 a.m., Dean called 000 again. He said the men were now trying to enter his home. Candace also spoke to the operator, Senior Constable Luke Weeks. Strangely, he became hostile toward her, accusing her of lying and giving inconsistent stories. At 12:56 a.m., Candace could be heard screaming before the call abruptly ended. At that moment, Corey and Thomas forced entry by lifting the sliding glass door off its track. Louis appeared to remain outside. Dean grabbed a knife for protection. Corey entered first and may have struck Dean. Dean stabbed Corey, who stumbled outside mortally wounded. Thomas then attacked Dean and was stabbed multiple times before exiting the house. At 12:58 a.m., Thomas called 000, but could only say he was at Alva Beach before collapsing. At 12:59 a.m., Dean called 000 for the 3rd time, saying, I just stabbed a bloke who broke into my house. The other guy's going to kill me. I don't want to die. Police and paramedics finally arrived at 1:16 a.m. 50 minutes after Dean's first call. Corey, 37, had 2 stab wounds and a blood alcohol level of 0.21%. Thomas, 27, had 6 stab wounds and a blood alcohol level of 0.53%, a potentially fatal level by itself. Candace was treated for her shoulder injury. Dean suffered bruising, and the knife was found on a table inside the home. After an investigation, police ruled that Dean acted in self-defense. A coroner reviewed the case, but ultimately the director of public prosecutions declined to prosecute, stating a murder charge had no reasonable prospect of success. Dean maintains his innocence and was never charged. Some family members of the deceased men believe Dean committed murder or manslaughter. However, under Australian law, self-defense requires proportional and reasonable force. Unlike the stronger legal protections seen in the United States, Dean was a bystander pulled into a chaotic situation created entirely by 4 intoxicated adults. He did not initiate confrontation, attempted to avoid violence, called emergency services multiple times, and faced a home invasion by 2 aggressive intruders who were both heavily intoxicated. Considering the evidence, Dean's use of force was justified and proportional to the threat he faced.